Okay. All right, guys. I assume you could all hear me. How y'all doing? Don't all answer at once. It's okay. So Thursday, I have really mixed feelings about this distance learning. I actually really enjoy not driving to work, but it's really hard not really knowing how you all feel or getting a feel for the room per se. But that's all right. We'll just keep going indefinitely, not until whenever we're let back in. So today I want to do a little bit, just a quick review of systems. I want to show you vascular systems, arterial vascular systems, and I want to show you some images. I realize that we could talk about this stuff till we're blue in the face, but if you don't know what it looks like on ultrasound, you don't know what it looks like in reality for us. So we're going to do a little, little review. I had a little note in here, and I don't even know what it means. Also a little bit about this semester. I had a question about how much of the details we're all going to need to know when it comes to the book. How much detail do we need to know? And of course, I want you to read every page of the chapter. My testing, I'm going to at least try to keep almost all, not necessarily all, but almost all the questions that we asked for testing. Oh, that's what that note was. Testing. When do we test? Or how do we test? But almost all, everything we test you on is going to be what we actually talked about. Because there's a lot of detail in the books, and I can't go over all of it, but it's worthwhile reading just for your own knowledge. And when it comes to the registry exams, everything's on the table, not just simply what I talked about, but literally everything in the book. So you're going to want to be familiar. Having said that, I was preparing this morning for vascular, and I really looked at that chapter 4, and I don't know how many pages, 15, 20 pages it is, and probably only about a page and a half, 2 pages of anatomy. Well, what I want to do is really hammer the anatomy. And so those 2 pages or whatever it is of actually talking about the anatomy, that's what we're going to hammer on first. Then we're going to go back and talk about aneurysms and plaque and all the disease states that could happen. So chapter 4, like I said, we're going to be on it for a while, and we're going to kind of go through it, and then we're going to kind of go back, really go through it again, because I want to get to the anatomy down first before we start talking about all the disease states. But like I said, there's your workbook is not ready for chapter 4, or I'm not asking for it yet, and probably no real testing on chapter 4. The other thing about it, and we're going to find out real soon when we get back into abdomen, is that I don't know. It's really hard to talk about abdomen and abdomen vascular separately. When we talk about the anatomy of the liver, we have to talk about the anatomy of the vascular in the liver. Same thing with the kidneys and everything else. So it's a little difficult to separate the two. So there is going to be overlap. I don't know. I'd probably just teach it all in one mega class, but let's see, disease state. Okay. And if there's no questions about that, So this other note, I just said testing, and now I remember what it was about, and like, you know, how do we start testing you in this? They're going to want to see testing just for participation type stuff, but I'll have to develop something, put something together where we can test you remotely. Oh, and that was the other thing. I sent a note out, guys, on the final exam. It looks like your patient care final is 1 o'clock on Monday. I didn't build it, but I did. Well, I built it on Blackboard. I typed it out and copied and pasted and all that, and built that out. It's not a big exam. It shouldn't take you long. It shouldn't hopefully be too hard for you. So let's see, that's 1 o'clock. Give you a full hour. Well, I think you're currently have. Well, I'm not going to say how much time you have for the test because I think it's too much. But we'll give you a full hour before even thinking about taking the final for physics. So that's obviously the bigger one to consider. And so that full hour to an hour and a half, like 2:30 physics exam. And so that gives you the weekend, but we have to have it done by Monday. Have to have it done by Monday. So need everyone to be there. If there is any kind of conflict, and there shouldn't because it's class time, but if there's, and we're all stuck at home anyway, but if there's anything you need to let me know by today, because it's not a democracy. It's a benevolent dictatorship. I'll try to work with you. But that's the other thing. We do need to take everyone to take the exam at more or less the same time. Okay, now I am ready to roll here. All right. Whoop. I've been playing with the program this morning, finding all sorts of neat stuff. So I want to go over some of the things that you will see. Let's start down here, actually. Just another picture, another diagram, but it's a worthwhile diagram. Remember when we talked about the superior, I told you erase that, didn't I? Anyway, the superior mesenteric artery, the SMA, how it goes around. And I really obviously didn't draw detail on how this goes. And it comes around to about here, at least officially, it goes around to that there. And then the inferior mesenteric artery, wow, comes around and meets in the middle there. And there is really what we call an anastomosis, where two arteries meet, two separate arteries meet. Well, I kind of thought about that. I figured, that's not really giving a clear indication of what's going on. So I figured I'd bring this picture in to talk more about that. You can see this is the superior mesenteric. Where's my? Interesting. I'm writing on the wrong layer. I got to be careful about that. Well, I guess I have to write right on this layer. Okay, well, that's what happens apparently when I add images after the fact. Okay, well, superior mesenteric artery comes out. Oh, here it is. That's where it starts, right here. And comes down really anterior to the aorta for a while. And you can see look at all these little branches, branch, hundreds of branches. and it's going to go around. It's going to start feeding the distal ileum. Well, it's going to feed other parts of the ileum here, but you have the distal ileum, right, as it goes into the cecum. Cecum is this area down here of the large intestines. And then it's feeding the ascending colon, transverse colon. And this is where it says marginal artery. I believe where that they actually consider that the point at which the SMA ends and the IMA ends, where they come together. But in any case, comes around transverse colon, and then the inferior mesenteric artery comes around. It is feeling the rectosigmoid. We mentioned sigmoid the other day because it is, yeah, it's S-shaped more or less, I believe. That's where the term comes from. Sigmoid colon, descending colon, and a little bit of the transverse colon as well. And of course, all of the intestines that are in here are also fed by these two arteries. I had a question after a class the other day about the difference between the internal and external. So I'll just mention this just for the heck of it. Iliac artery here, common iliac artery, right and left. Once it splits, it becomes the external iliac artery, and then here is the internal iliac artery. The internal is the one that feeds the pelvis itself. External is going to go straight down into your legs and feed the legs. Okay. I think that's all I want to say about that. All right. So, of course, I messed around with some stuff here. There's my, there's more or less my little left gastric artery there. So remember, hepatic artery here, splenic artery there. And if we can imagine taking an image transverse in the epigastrium, transverse epigastrium, if you get it just right, you're going to get the seagull sign. There are seagulls. Whoops. When you're a kid, you draw your seagulls like that, more or less. And then there we go. Well, I guess I don't need to arrow. Someone's already arrowed it for me. The red arrows are showing the celiac trunk, also known as the celiac axis. So from here, that's really, from there to there, that's the whole artery, about 1 centimeter, give or take. A little longer, sometimes a little shorter, others. This guy going off like this, and he actually is going to drop, which makes this seagull a little more of a, you know, sweeping seagull down there. He's going to drop down pretty quickly, and we'll explain why that drop. Because when we look at the anatomy image, it looks like it should go straight over to the spleen, but instead, in our ultrasound, instead of going straight over, and here's our spleen, of course, this is a splenic artery. That's what we think would happen. Our spleen is actually That's not accurate. Our spleen is here, but it's deeper. In other words, the hilum of the spleen, this area right here where it's going to receive the vessels, is deep in the body. And so when we look at an anatomy image and we see we see a pancreas doing that, and we see a spleen over here, we expect to see the splenic artery, which follows the pancreas. We expect it to just kind of go straight over on our video screen, on our ultrasound screen. But it does something very different. It does this on our screen. And that can be a little disconcerting, a little confusing. And it's simply because, yes, it actually is going to the patient's left, going to the left, but it's also going deeper. And in fact, I could tell just by on this person, it really dives down like that. So the splenic hilum is down all the way back down there. That's just a little point. We'll talk about that more later. So yeah, splenic artery there, and the green arrow is the hepatic artery. This is a nice image to get. Doctors like this. Obviously, aorta IVC, left lobe of the liver. This actually is a little bit of, I cut it off. Going down there. That's all splenic tail. I'm sorry, pancreatic tail. But nice image to give the doctors if you can. And person has a lot of aliasing here. I guess I could have changed that up a bit. But once again, now we have it's hard to see where I guess that's the aorta there, right? We're missing just the bottom of here, but that's simply because it's out of the plane. A lot of aliasing, but this celiac trunk goes straight up, and then its branches go off to either side. It is and let's see, is that correct? Think about this. Yeah. That little guy right there is actually a gastroduodenal artery. Whoops. Or the GDD, whatever that is. Gastroduodenal artery right there. But I have another image to show you for that. In fact, let's go straight to it. Now, okay, we got rid of that guy. I know what we're going to do.
And just to confirm, those images that we were looking at just a second ago, those were sagittal, right?
Oh, no. Remember, here, just let me hit my forward. Oh, it's not going to let me. All right, let me do it again. Remember, I had our transducer, yellow transducer now, transverse. So when I say this is the transducer and I put it sideways like this, that's a transverse image. And obviously, if that's transverse, then that's a long image. But that makes sense, though. This is off to the right. This is off to the right here. The spleen is off to the left. And so if we're transverse, we're going to see an arm and an arm. If we're sagittal, well, if we're sagittal, this is what we're going to see. Since you asked it, we shall look for it. There we are. Oh, actually, this is a good picture to be on. I'm not liking that color anymore. Okay. I really like this picture. Now, this makes sense. Sagittal. We're seeing I'm learning new things every day. We're seeing the length of the aorta here. We're seeing the length of the SMA there. We're not seeing, but I know it's right there. There's a little vein right there. That's the left renal vein. I really like this picture because we get celiac trunk. Now, I've seen that trunk shaped all different ways. I've seen it shaped where it's practically flat like the SMA. Well, that's because the liver weighs it down. I've seen it bend around like this quite often, and that's not at all unusual. And the reason it happens, it bends like that, is probably, and it's very hard to see in this picture, but there's a crust of the diaphragm, that muscular crust of the diaphragm. And of course, if it's longer, it's either causing a problem, or if it's not causing a problem, and the least of which, the artery has to kind of bend around it. Or it's just simply anatomically that way. So here to here, from there to there, that is the whole length of the celiac trunk. This is nice because it shows something we don't see every time. This can be a little difficult to catch this guy, and this is about as much as we ever catch the left gastric artery. The left gastric artery starts cephalad. In other words, cephalad is where the head is. So then, you know, our head here, feet are going to be down there. LGA. Now, we've talked about this guy. I'll be honest with you, one of the least important vessels that we could really point out. So just keep it in mind that we want to know that it's there, but it's not very important. Celiac axis or celiac trunk, either way, that's an important vessel. That gets plaque. And if that gets plaque, well, now you have a problem getting blood both to your spleen, your liver, and quite frankly, your parts of your stomach and parts of your pancreas as well. So that's an important vessel. I mentioned the other day that if you are slightly off kilter, if you are, or like you could see over here, this person's celiac trunk, I assume this is the same person. Yeah, I assume this is the same person. Their celiac trunk kind of comes off a little wonky. So if this transducer, if this image, let me grab a straight line. Oops. Let's say the plane of our image over here, this sagittal plane, let's say that sagittal plane is really going through here. What it's going to see is just a little bit of that splenic artery and then the celiac trunk. Well, look at here. We have Kurt. We have a circle for the splenic artery. A circle because obviously we're cutting it off in trans. A circle for the splenic artery and the celiac trunk. if we go off this direction, we're either gonna miss the aorta, or if we come in, oh boy, if we come in at an angle now more like this, we're gonna see a circle, except this time that circle is gonna, obviously not right there, but very close to there, because you're just scanning over. That circle is going to be the hepatic artery, and you might still be able to see the aorta down here. Okay. We're not getting in the veins yet, but we have a splenic vein, and you see it's a little more flat. But in any case, let's trace that out. It's unusual. I can't really see the whole aorta. It can't be that small, but aorta, celiac trunk, splenic artery, hepatic artery, common, but just hepatic artery is fine. All right. Actually, let me draw some. I'm wrong. I don't know what layer that is, so I can't get rid of it. That's okay. So I mentioned that, of course, our spleen is back here. These are the arteries. The splenic artery is feeding that, and then, well, we got some part of the stomach. Part of the stomach is around here. So those are feeding stomach, and then these are feeding kind of the, let's see, the anterior side of the pancreas. So if I were to draw quick pancreas here, tail goes all the way. Well, that's not to scale, but you get the general idea. So this is all pancreas then, blood feeding into the pancreas, tail of the pancreas pretty much goes into the hilum of the spleen. And look right here, this little hole is, we're going to see oftentimes, sometimes it's hard to see because there's also a lot of gas in this area. We're going to see a hole in the head of the pancreas on the anterior surface, gastroduodenal artery. And by the way, gastro, so this artery is feeding part of the stomach, so the stomach's kind of all over in this area. Duodenal, the very first part of the intestines after it comes off the stomach, and actually the duodenum kind of curves around here. The duodenum this is called the C loop of the duodenum, comes off the stomach. So it's a gastroduodenal artery. But we'll talk more about that when we actually get into the anatomy of the pancreas, the anatomy of the duodenum and the stomach. It's a little, like I said earlier, it's a little hard to talk about one thing without talking about another in this course. So here we are. I love this picture because it has so much, and unlike other pictures on the internet, it's not all messed up. It only has one little arrow on it. No, of course not. Okay. Let's use like an orange. That's good. All right. So Once again, you saw how I just drew. Sorry to move this again on you guys. You saw how I just drew this really horrible looking pancreas here. Kind of a straight shot over to the spleen. Straight shot. But then we look at it in reality. And this is what the tail is doing. So the tail on our screen is going down and to the left, but actually more down than left. Remember, patients, when you're, this is a transverse image. I should write that. If that's trans, that means this is left and this is right. Down to the left. Well, it actually is a straight organ. It kind of gives us a bit of an illusion. It took me a while to wrap my head around this. It wasn't necessarily easy, but it's going down because it's going deeper. In other words, the head, let's see, head, neck, body are more or less pretty shallow. Let's say 1.5 centimeters, maybe 2 centimeters shallow. The end of the tail, let's say 5 centimeters. So all that means is that there is a bit of a twist. It might not be a perfectly straight organ, but there is a bit of a twist, and then it really dives away from us. And that is why it seems curved on our screen, yet every anatomical picture you've ever seen doesn't look anything like that. But we have a day or two that we're going to talk about this organ, so we could lay off on the pancreas for now. But here is our gastroduodenal artery. So we're seeing it as a circle. It means that means one, it's an artery. At least if there's blood flow in it, it's an artery. What we're not seeing is, let's see, not quite at this plane. There's a well, this wasn't bad if I don't say so myself. We're not seeing all of this, but splenic artery, hepatic artery, and here's that little branch coming off. Obviously, it doesn't end here. It continues to go and feed. Well, it doesn't feed down there technically, but it goes on into to feed the duodenum, and little branches are going to come off and feed the stomach. So it's obviously it's not a dead end. That would be a little weird. But yeah, so GDA. This guy, what is going on? I'm on the wrong layer somehow. This guy, remember I said that the superior mesenteric artery is surrounded by fat. Don't really know why it's surrounded by fat, but it is. So rarely will you find an SMA that doesn't look somewhat like this. Once again, round vessel, it's an artery surrounded by echogenic material, and it's above the aorta. It is going to be the SMA. This over here, by the way, is the IVC. And you see how it's pointed like this? Well, that's because it's actually receiving. We can't see it. It could be slightly out of plane, or it could be so flattened out that we're just not seeing it. Left renal vein. Okay. Oh, and plane of view we were just at with that picture. Let's see, renal arteries, renal vein. Of course, now it's too small and too red. And there we go. So we had a interesting transverse image going across the aorta. We didn't really see the renal arteries in that picture, but a little trick to know they're not easy to see. They're surprisingly small considering how important they are. But we crossed the SMA, we crossed the aorta, and then we saw just a little bit, every time, we saw just a little bit of the renal vein coming across there. I have another image that I was working on earlier, another screen entirely that we could also look at. One last picture, actually, let's look down here real quick. Remember, that is the inferior mesenteric artery. And this guy, hard to see on most people, and it goes and turns away from us. Well, from this point of view, away from us, it turns towards the patient's left immediately. And you can see that here. Now, what's interesting on this image, well, first of all, here. So here's our aorta. This isn't exactly a transverse. It's more oblique on the aorta. So we're not quite, it looks like it's a transverse image, but it's probably oblique, and we're just not getting a whole lot of it. But the IMA is blue. Well, yeah, it's blue according to, if it's going away from us, it should be blue. So that's correct. And interestingly enough, that is the real waveform. And this up here, which they actually measured, is not. and I have no idea. They actually have a nice Doppler angle, nice angle. Everything looks pretty good here, and yet they still have a lot of crosstalk. So the only thing I could think of is that their pulse wave Doppler gain must be really high in order for this to happen. But the fact that they measured the wrong side really doesn't matter. Really doesn't matter because, well, that's the same. You know, basically 30 centimeters per second. Yeah, 30 centimeters per second. Okay, it's 140. All right, you know what? Vascular review. That's what we're doing now, day 2 vascular. Oh, do I want to save changes? No, I messed it up pretty good. Okay. Actually, yeah, let's go ahead. It's 1:40. Let's take a break till 2 o'clock is fine. Any questions, comments, anything? All right, nothing on the chat either. All right, go ahead, take basically a 20-minute break, and I'll see you guys back at 2 o'clock. Let's see. Pause, Alt-P.
Kurt, you're still recording.
Recording. Attendance. Okay. Back to work here, guys. I don't even have notes, but I don't get me wrong. I just freehand all of this. I drew some images earlier because obviously sometimes I'm sure it's a little ponderous to watch me work here, but so obviously we have the just a quick review. We have the aorta, aortic root, the very first arteries that come. Why do I have a? Interesting. Okay, sorry. It's a horrible color anyway. Aortic root with the coronary arteries coming off, feeding the heart, ascending aorta, aortic arch, descending thoracic aorta, and then when we cross over the abdomen, we have the abdominal aorta. And let's just point. Drew this in earlier just for simplicity's sake. And so once again, we have our heart. I just need to add a layer here. Make that my color layer. That should work. Okay. So once again, right I am getting a little frustrated. If I could only write on the layer that I'm on. Because I did this ahead of time. Oh, what a pain. Okay. Right atrium is here. Left atrium, left ventricle, right ventricle there. The two holes that I drew into the right atrium are from the superior vena cava going down, the inferior vena cava, the IVC, going up. And then they're going to go up, obviously, feed here, go around is all its thing. That is another unit for now. Okay. So I just want to draw that organ, and I have some other organs that I'm going to add right here. Let's see. Now I could draw on it. Strangely enough. Okay, we have the liver, more or less like this. We have the right kidney. That actually is, that kidney is posterior to the liver. I made the kidney a little farther down, but I really kind of thought about it. So now the kidney is pretty much entirely behind the liver. So that kidney is posterior. Over here on the other side, we have the spleen and left kidney. Left kidney is just a little tip behind the spleen. And then the pancreas. Once again, the pancreas shown just to be shooting straight across to the splenic hilum, but we know that our ultrasound image looks very different than this. Just keep that in mind. Now, let's add another layer here. So now we see the splenic artery coming out and feeding the spleen, and little radicals, little branches coming off, feeding the pancreas. And you can't see the stomach here, but the hepatic artery coming off in this direction, splitting into right and left hepatic arteries inside the liver. And then that little circle right here, we see is that gastroduodenal artery, the GDA, going through the head of the pancreas. I've drawn just really basically the superior mesenteric artery, the inferior mesenteric artery going off in their respective directions. And of course, the gonadal arteries are there as well. Now that's all review. And we've talked about the arterial, the basic, I would say the basic arterial anatomy. Now we have to get into the veins. So now here we have the actual IVC drawn in, and it's inferior vena cava. Now, technically, when you speak about a vein, technically speaking, we shouldn't be starting up top and working our way down, because veins start distal and they go upward. They go in the opposite direction of arteries. So technically speaking, and sometimes you'll see this in textbooks or even videos, they describe the vein as, if we're going to describe it as starting at the iliacs and working our way up. But we're going to go ahead, just start from the top and work our way down. The first veins we see are 3, 1, 2, and all the way over here, 3. But that's too ugly, so I'm only going to keep one line in there. These are the hepatic veins. Let's do the chisel point. That looks a little nicer. Actually, this is starting to bother me, so my sloppiness, not really my fault, but still bothers me. What did I say this was? IVC, hepatic. Did I just say arteries? I hope I didn't. Well, hepatic veins. The right, see if I can draw that small, right, middle, and oh boy, we'll just put a little LT over here, left. These are the right, middle, and and left hepatic veins. I mentioned that the pancreas looks really different on ultrasound. These hepatic veins look nothing like this on ultrasound. And I've got another tool to help you understand why. In fact, I'm really excited about it because it's very hard to get students to understand our perspective. But I'll just tell you what the problem is that when we look at these hepatic veins, we come up under the ribs. Our transducer is transverse and oblique. So basically transverse, but a little bit oblique because we're going to be sweeping up from the epigastrium below the ribs and looking up in that direction. And if you think about how we're going to look at that, that means these veins are going to be basically upside down on our screen. But we'll talk about more of that later. Actually, let's get rid of our organs that might make our job a little bit easier right now. Okay, so the hepatic veins. One, two, and three. Three main hepatic veins. There's obviously more branches, and sometimes there's an extra branch coming off the IVC, but there's three major veins. As we come down, of course, we have the renal veins as well. So left renal vein, right renal vein. Of course, next to the right renal artery. I'm getting tired.
Same.
I plan on going easy on you guys tomorrow. Left. God, I got it. Right. Yes, okay, my God, Kurt. Okay, left renal artery, left renal artery, left renal vein, right renal vein, right renal artery. Notice that the left renal vein, and by the way, there's basically between these two arteries is the spine. Notice that the left renal vein goes over the aorta. If you ever actually see one that goes underneath the aorta, that's something to mention because it's not supposed to be there, and it will cause problems. Because it's already causing enough problems, the fact that it goes over the aorta but under the SMA. So it gets squeezed out right here. So I could have drawn this vein considerably larger. And it happens a lot, especially in thinner people. So that's, potential for the nutcracker syndrome right there. and come all the way across. We'll talk about this vein here in just a second. Notice that the right renal artery goes behind the vein. Its arteries generally go behind veins so that the veins are not crushed by the artery. Incidentally, yeah, I'll mention it now. Incidentally, we're showing one right renal artery, one left renal artery. There can be multiples. So sometimes 2 or 3 or even 4 arteries, which really makes the renal artery exam enjoyable. But we're talking about veins right now. This is actually going to be a short section of the class because there's not much else I'm going to talk about, but I'll figure something out. Okay, so as we come further down, we see this guy. Well, we see it on this image. Seeing it with ultrasound, very difficult and very rare. And we usually don't look for it for that reason. But that is the right gonadal vein. Just as we had the right gonadal artery here. Let's see, I'll put it quick. That's the artery. And then the left artery, well, for some reason, well, actually, there's a good reason. The left gonadal vein does not go back to the IVC. It goes to the left renal vein. Now, I don't know what your book says. I haven't gotten to that point yet. But there's all sorts of problems with the left gonadal vein, probably in females, but it's less noticeable because, well, their gonads are hidden. They're in the inside, but males obviously are on the outside of the body. And there's a problem here. Blood doesn't like to travel from this vein back to the IVC as well as it travels through up this vein, the right side. So the right side rarely has any problems. The left side oftentimes does. And we often see men with varicoceles in the scrotum because, I got to explain what a varicocele is. I forget which class we're in. Well, varicocele, let's just imagine my vein normally being that size, but then due to back pressure that shouldn't be involved, it now becomes more like that size. In other words, varicose veins. Just like you see in people's legs, we have varicose veins in other parts of the body as well. Now, a lot of your books and a lot of papers, and I think it was all because of one stupid idiot out there. That's not very nice. But someone said at one point that the main problem is this 90 degree turn that it takes as it comes from up the body, takes a sharp right hand, well, I guess from our perspective, left hand turn into the left renal vein. And they say, well, that's the problem. Completely forgetting about what the real problem is, as far as I'm concerned. And I have found a couple of studies out there that support this, because this was always my contention, that the backup of blood seen in men and almost always in the scrotum of men, and it's almost always on the left-hand side, is really due to compression of the left renal vein over here. So that's just a little something. Wow, I thought this was going to be take longer. It's only 17 minutes. Okay, that's all right. Like I said, we are ahead. I do want to mention, we'll kind of give you an idea of where we're going next in vascular. And it's actually pretty interesting. Think about something we're not seeing here. Now, it could be because I just didn't mention it yet, or I decided it was too unimportant to mention. But think about how the body is normally made. If there's a femoral artery, well, you could better believe there's a femoral vein. If there's an artery taking blood into an organ, into an extremity, there's a vein taking it out. And oftentimes they're named similarly, sometimes they're not. You have a carotid artery and a jugular vein. Now, they're not named the same, but they're going in two different directions, of course. Aorta, IVC. Gonadal vein, gonadal artery. Renal vein, renal artery, or renal artery, renal vein. But I haven't mentioned a splenic vein. I guess, yeah, we could say, let's get my liver back here. The hepatic artery goes in, hepatic veins go out. They're not parallel, but they obviously, one's feeding it and one's draining it, so that's okay. But mesenteric artery, what, I got rid of the wrong. Well, we've talked about mesenteric arteries. We haven't talked about mesenteric veins. So it's really interesting. So far it's pretty simple. Blood in, blood out, blood in, blood out. But we're missing some things here. And what we're missing is the entire the portal system. Where is that? So in the abdomen, it's not so cut and dry. You not only have to feed organs, but some of those organs, they take that blood and they need to pass it through the liver first. So what the portal system is a system that takes all the blood from the mesenteric artery. This is still considered mesenteric over here, going out into the spleen. All of that blood going in now has to go back to the liver. So that is what we'll talk about next time, is the portal system. The portal system, well, let's see. I would say the aorta, and because of plaque and aneurysms, pretty much that's it. As ultrasound techs, we look at the aorta because of plaque and aneurysms. We look at the renal arteries because of plaque and like one specific disease. Actually, one disease we already talked about. You guys know it for the carotid. It's fibromuscular dysplasia, FMD. Fibromuscular dysplasia happens in these arteries as well. When it comes to the renal, the IVC and veins, there are reasons to look at that. There are reasons to look at the hepatic veins, but they're a little bit fewer. The portal system, though, that's kind of our bread and butter in ultrasound, is really understanding the portal system, because a lot of things could happen with that. So that's a little teaser for Tuesday. That's a Tuesday teaser. Can't think of anything. You guys haven't been writing me. I feel so lonely. Any questions on today's lecture and how the veins and the arteries go so far? Nothing? Anyone like my drawings? I'm actually really proud of them.
I was just about to say that. It's actually really good.
Thank you.
Really good.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess I'm going to let you go quite early today. Don't tell on me. What I'm going to spend some time doing, I'll get this up on YouTube. But speaking of YouTube, I'll find some more videos to post. We kind of have to figure out. The corporate is telling us that we really have to do something specific for lab, and we're fighting back, saying, you know, other than watching videos, what can the students do? And so that's pretty much where we're at is video watching. So, but I'll try to find some. Probably not a daily video. It's too much. Daily videos are too much for me to find, and there's not that many good videos on the internet. But I think once a week is good, and then we'll have to figure out. I think discussion boards are kind of dumb, so we'll figure out how to get evidence of viewing, and maybe just have you guys just do one comment or something.
Mr. S, I wrote you a note so that way you know I'm in attendance, by the way. On the group chat.
Okay.
Take a screenshot, show them I'm in attendance.
Oh, we see. I see you. And Zoom records it as well, I guess. Okay. We're good, and cool. I'm glad some of you liked today's lecture. I'm trying real hard to make this worth our time. I've been hearing some stories from other programs, and I don't know what the hell they're learning, but I think we're doing okay. So, all right, guys, we'll see you tomorrow. All right.
I have
Bye-bye.
a question for you.
Oh, yes, sir.
Yeah. I wanted to wait till everything was done because it's basically for the other class, I guess, because it's more anatomy.
Mm-hmm.
But I was going over a question, and I was having a really tough time because it doesn't really just give like a clear-cut list of organs that are intraperitoneal and retroperitoneal. So like really muddy water there. And one of the questions it seems pretty specific because it's asking what is within the peritoneal, but like it seems like every option that they give me for the multiple choice is inside the peritoneal. It's like liver, spleen, gallbladder, and pancreas.
Most of the pancreas. And I saw that too, and I was very curious because most books really they hammer it in which are which, and your book did not. Let me write that down as a note. So the pancreas, how well you can see my little screen here, but I mentioned the other day that if you took a balloon, and this is what I usually do in class, and this will be my. Shit, well, I'm holding a pen. I don't see it when I'm looking at my own screen.
Sorry.
There it is. You can see it's kind of There, kind of. Anyway, I might as well put the pen down. If you have this balloon, well, I'll just use my fist. And if you shove your fist hard enough into the balloon will envelop itself around till eventually it's tight around your wrist. But there's still a space inside the balloon, but your hand is now completely and utterly surrounded with, peritoneum. So your hand is surrounded by visceral peritoneum. The outside of the balloon, that's still a space. We call that the parietal peritoneum. The pancreas pushes in such a way that part of the head of the pancreas is considered inside the peritoneum and the tail is considered outside. Let me also get a better list because that book didn't. I noticed that as well. The book did not wasn't very clear at all on that. Anything else? Nada? No, nada. Okay.
I don't think so. I was trying to. I know that there's a couple of questions that, like, I almost have to go to like other resources to get like a clear answer on it, because for some reason I don't know why it's not. They just don't. I'm not saying like spoon feed me the answer, but like make the answer recognizable, I guess is what I'd be getting at. Because like another thing that they did was like in the images, it's like in the imaging portion of it is for the lipoma.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I know that the subcutaneous, it's superficial, it's got subcutaneous tissue that's right there. But then they're also asking like what these echogenic lines are that are kind of going with the image. Let's see if I can find it. But they asked me what that was, and I was like, shoot, I don't even know what that is, and it doesn't say what it is. Chapter 4.
Asking for chapter 2, right?
3. No. It is 2. You're right.
Use the internet to find those answers.
There it is. Page 33. So you got the image of the.
Seriously, it would be helpful if I grabbed the right book. Let's try this again. Oh, God. It's referring back to the book?
Yeah. So in the workbook, it'd be in, I guess it's chapter or page 17.
Oh, right.
4. And it's asking what structure do the arrows represent?
Page 33?
Yes.
One, the image with no arrows on it?
Yeah. Well, no, I'm saying the question that I'm talking about is in the workbook. But if you look at it, you can see the two echogenic lines that are leading up. Like if you were coming from the left side of that image, they're
Right.
dead in the middle. What's up, girl?
How's big girl?
She just woke up from a nap.
Number 2, what structures do the arrows represent? Yeah, subcutaneous, fatty layer. Well, I think they're going to try to say that that's the peritoneum, the lipoma within the anterior abdominal wall. It's not the peritoneum, though. Gosh, from that picture alone, that's hard.
Yeah.
So you got the skin layer, it's got a fatty layer. Well, I mean, if that's fat, and then the next layer down has got to be muscle. So fascia.
For number 1, I put the superficial fascia, and number 2, I put the muscular layer.
And the arrows are pointing to the transversalis fascia. That's what I put.
That's what I put too.
Transversalis fascia. Okay. Yeah. Gosh, I'm not 100%. I'm going to have to look at that. It's hard to tell from just one picture like this. Skin. Superficially located, well-defined, and hypocoagulated to the adjacent musculature, like the intermuscular lipoma. Intermuscular lipoma. Well, yeah, okay. So that is the muscle layer. Can be distinguished from the subcutaneous fat. Yeah, yeah. So I would say transversalis fascia as well, because that actually is the muscle layer. But if that's the muscle, but if that's, yeah, okay. I'm gonna look at that, because if that's the muscle layer, and I won't doubt that it is. It's not terribly clear as muscle. Then there's a little bit too much tissue below it, because basically you have the muscle layer, you have the transversalis fascia, you have the peritoneum, and then you're done. You know, you're into the abdomen, abdominal cavity. So actually, what I'm seeing is both above and below that line where the arrows are pointing to. I see muscle both above and below.
See, because that's what I was saying, because like if you were going by the layer diagram that they have on page 15, you would have like the subcutaneous, and then they're saying like you got like scarpa fascia, deep fascia, transversalis.
Yeah, and they also have the obliques. So is this anterior, or is this off to the side a little bit, where you have maybe external, internal oblique, and then where it becomes extremely anechoic at below that, it looks like they've actually inked out the image, because it wouldn't normally just go suddenly black like that. You know what I mean? So it looks like someone's actually inked it out. So maybe if it's anterior but off to the side anterior, then you're actually looking at the obliques. All right. Yeah. Whatever answer you give me, if I can't figure it out, whatever answer you give me is fine. Okay.
All right, man. Well, I think that's all I got for now.
Okay. Cool.
All right. Appreciate you. We'll see you tomorrow.
All right, guys. We'll see you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Kurt.
Yes.
Okay, so I don't want to ask you like more questions, but I sent you in the chat, but I guess I don't know if you got it, but because of the case study number 1, same page, I had a hard time also with that picture, but I was guessing it was a congenital diaphragmatic hernia, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, this is actually a real odd picture because
and I see
it's
the picture in the book, but like it doesn't say like enough information, so I don't know like because
Yeah.
it says like what the common um like the causes of the abnormality. So I just put that it was a congenital diaphragmatic hernia, and that it separates organs, and that you can see a hole in the diaphragm, but I'm not sure if that's right.
Yeah. Well, what's odd about this picture is that it's a very strange it's a strange angle, and I'm thinking perhaps this person is actually getting scanned through the back
Mm-hmm.
because obviously we know where the liver is, and you know, what does the number one? Well, number one is fluid, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the fluid is obviously, it's either going to be ascites, which from this point of view, my first impression was like, oh yeah, there's ascites around the liver, it's going up over the top of the liver, so probably really bad ascites. But what's in between the arrows actually looks a lot like.
Are we looking the same
Oh, I'm sorry.
picture? It's page 17, case study, question number 1.
I was on the one above.
Oh, okay.
um,
Yeah, on that one, the case study number 1.
Mm-hmm. Okay, a neonate presents for abdominal sonogram a few hours after delivery to follow up an abnormality seen on prenatal. This image was taken in the right upper quadrant and demonstrates a diaphragm indicated by letter D. Liver is seen both superior and inferior to the diaphragm. What is the likely diagnosis? What causes? Oh yeah, so congenital diaphragmatic hernia
Okay.
is correct. I'm sorry, I was looking.
Okay.
Hey,
No,
so what did you put for number 3 above?
so above what I put for that one, I put a lipoma is echogenic, mass located within the interior abdominal wall.
No, the one even above that, the with the one
Number 3.
yeah.
Okay, so for number 3, I put that it was the structure of a right lung, but I'm not sure like if I'm right. And then I just put number 1 represents large pleural effusion.
Yeah, excellent. I agree, but it's good, but it's a very odd
Yeah, but
image.
I had
So
a hard
I think they were going through the back.
because I didn't know like in that picture to just put a like it's just a lung or just like to actually put it like right lung. So
Yeah, that's fine. It's definitely I would say I agree. It's the right lung and pleural effusion, and yeah, I think you're right on the case study. It's a congenital diaphragmatic hernia.
okay. All right. Yeah, I just wanted to be sure about that one because I had some hard time on these pictures.
Yeah, I gotta say I've got some difficult pictures here.
Yeah. So
Yeah. Okay.
that's why. Yeah, but okay. Well, thank you, Kurt. Appreciate
Yes,
it.
sir. Hey, yeah, thank you.
And see you tomorrow.
Okay, see ya.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.